everyone, I'm here with Mike Joyce, the man who started the Ponaganset wrestling program and has since taken a step back to coach as an assistant. Mike, how you doing?
Good, sir. How are you today?
Doing well. We're just going to talk about New England wrestling, Ponaganset wrestling, touch on some great topics. But first, we're going to talk about you. You started wrestling in Ohio, right?
Yes.
You grew up there?
Yeah, so I grew up in Ohio, started wrestling when I was 5 years old. That's when they started you back then. I remember the youth program I was in. They had kids that were 3 and 4 years old. I wrestled all through CYO there, and then I wrestled for a school that's since been closed. It's Chanel High School. It was probably one of the most successful programs behind St. Edward's, which everybody knows. And there's 2 other programs, St. Paris Graham in Division II, and then Walsh Jesuit for a good 30-year run was really successful. So we were a Division III school. We're the only school who won Division I, Division II, Division III. I think if I were to quote the stats off the top of my head, we had over 40 state champions, over 110 placers. My coach was a National Hall of Fame coach. We had a really awesome coaching staff, which I kind of used that blueprint to establish our own coaching staff at Ponaganset. I thought that the way in which, and I don't know if it was accidental genius or if it was purposeful, but the way in which our high school coach had put everything together just basically geared us up and made us successful every year, the years that I was there, and then for about 25 years total.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that was kind of my next question. That was So you wanted to bring that kind of structure to Rhode Island, you're saying, right? What you had in high school with the coaches?
Yeah,
that culture?
Yeah, I think the culture is the key. I think if you look at any program at every level of sports where they're successful, culture is key. And if a program, whether it's a club program or a high school program or even a professional program, if they're continuously being successful, a lot of it comes down to the culture. And so for me, when I started to talk a little bit about starting the program, I came to Rhode Island back in 2000 and got a job at Ponaganset High School. At the time, they had a public high school wrestling program, kind of like everyone else's. Coaches, they function the way coaches normally do. They were really good guys. They wrestled for 3 months out of the year and probably took their kids to a camp in the summertime. I know that was something they did regularly. And then when my kids were born, by the way, they're working on my roof, so if you hear any weird noises, it's not me. But
oh, good.
Okay, but when my kids were born, I had 3 boys and kind of back to back, and they were rambunctious. But I had in mind that I wanted to start a wrestling program because of everything that wrestling did for me as a person, in terms of character development and the rest, and just a lot of the really important life lessons that wrestling teaches you. And so I started a youth program first, and then a couple of years into that youth program, we started to have reasonable success. But my approach was a little different than most people's in that the goal of youth wrestling for me was for kids to be successful in high school, the middle of high school and into college. I think it was Zeke Jones said that the average elite athlete has about 8 years of grind in them. That's not the exact quote, but it's kind of what he was referring to. And what that means, you have 8 years where if you're a normal human being, even if you're an elite athlete, you can dedicate yourself to something as grinding and as difficult as wrestling and cutting weight and staying focused and performing at the top of your game for about an 8-year period. And so did I want that 8-year period to be from, second grade or 8 years old to 16 for my guys, for my own children? Did I want it to be from 16 to 24, which to me is what we're trying to do, because we were thinking about the big picture.
Burn them out too early,
Well, that's funny you say burn them out, because I used to have arguments with a lot of the club coaches, and John Clark and I used to joke a lot about kids being crispy, and he loved that term crispy because that's our term for burnt out. And how many kids in the landscape of wrestling that could have been something great got burnt out and never really achieved what they maybe were destined to achieve. So I think that was how we started it. And so we didn't really do a lot of competition. Initially, we did a lot of practice. And even our practice wasn't a lot of live. It was a lot of learning, and it was technique. And so I think what people often say about a lot of Ponaganset wrestlers is they're technical. And that's a compliment to us because that's kind of like what we're going for. And then getting into like the coaching staff and how we kind of structured it. In Ohio, I had a older gentleman on my team. He was real tough. He was old school, and we called him Old Hickory, which was the name for one of the, I think, Andrew Jackson. And then I had Larry Vance. I was really fortunate. I had Larry Vance. I had Dane Tussle. I had the Ryba brothers. Three of those guys were all Americans in college. Two of those guys were 2- and 3-time Ohio State champions at the time.
Like the star-studded room.
It was, and so, but what was funny is, other than those guys being like really good at wrestling, they were like our big brothers. So you had Grandpa, who was Old Hickory, then you had Graham, who was like your dad, and then you had these younger dudes that were, would roll with you on a daily basis, but they were big brother. Each of those guys kind of had their own like function, and you could go to Big Brother if Grandpa was being too much of a hard ass, and mentally they went at you, and you could like confide in them. And sometimes you'd go to Dad, and sometimes you needed Old Hickory and Grandpa around because he had the wisdom behind him, and he knew it needed to be done for you to be successful, right? So that's kind of how we did our staff. Like, I joke with Dave all the time. Dave Amato, he's coached for 50 years. I call him Old Hickory because that's like from my childhood. That's
he's the Old Hickory of
he's the Old Hickory of Ponaganset wrestling. And I'm like Dad, I think you could say. And then I have Steve Minio and Steve DeNoble, who are like, the guys that are rolling around every day with the kids. Dave runs the practice. They roll around with the kids, and I kind of oversee things. Like, they joke that I'm the CEO, and we also kind of like built our team around the way that really successful college programs structure. You have a head coach, and the head coach kind of handles all the garbage that no one else wants to handle, and schedules everything, and talks to all the college coaches and whatnot. And then you have the guy that runs the room. And Dave is absolutely fantastic at running a room. He's great at blending new green kids in with kids that have a lot of experience. And he does a very good job of bringing those other kids along that are newer and still not allowing those better kids to regress. That's a big fear I think a lot of parents have about high school coaching, is that, your kid spends 9 months in a club and improves, and then they wonder, is my kid regressing in high school, or are they?
Yeah, is the coaching style beneficial for them for that 3 months?
Yeah, and so that was a long-winded answer. Sorry about that, but I'm going to tell you. You and I did an interview a long time ago, and I talked about being wrestling obsessed. This is my obsession.
Yeah,
so
I remember that.
I think about this all the time, and I think about like, what can I do to make it better? What can I do to tweak it? What can I do to keep what is working and throw away what's not? And so, that's how we structure it.
And then it all paid off. You won your first team state title in 2017, right?
Yes, that was a big moment for us. It was the first for our school. I think we had a wrestling program for 36 years or 33 years before that. We'd won a sectional championship. But that was our first.
Were you guys
state
Division II or something?
Yeah, they had Division II. I haven't been like part of Rhode Island wrestling for that long. I started head coaching in 2015, 2016, and I had helped out in 2002 when my kids were really little. But my wife was like, she pulled me back in because she knows what kind of person I am, and if I got too involved, I'd never be home. So I had to wait for my kids to get a little bit older, and that's why she didn't mind the youth wrestling program, because I got to take them out of the house and she got a break. But then I got into it.
So
state title was big, and that same year we won a New England title. And in all fairness, we probably shouldn't have. My oldest son goes back and forth with my other sons about how that team was better than this team, we really won that New England title because Danbury Star that year, if you remember, had a knee injury.
Macho, I'll never forget that.
And he wasn't able to wrestle at New England's, and anything can happen. But if he would have wrestled, we wouldn't have won. So we benefited a little bit from that. But that was 3 years into my tenure with the high school team, and so it was a gift, I guess you could say, because it was a springboard for our program, and it helped us to get into like better competition, better tournaments, things like that. Yeah. But now I think this year's team is very young that won. We had a couple veterans on here that just graduated, but for the very foreseeable future, I fully, I'm not, being arrogant or anything, but I fully expect us to be competing, if not winning, a New England title year over year for the next 4 or 5 years.
Nice. And, even not just New England's, you guys won Eastern States Classic this year. A tournament you could argue is maybe harder than New England's, if not just as hard, And,
yeah, I thought it was
yeah, talk about it.
I thought it was a good proxy for New England's. If you look at like how it broke down, I think we had the same number of placers at New England's as we did at Eastern States, and they kind of like finished in the same area without too much variation. So we really like that. Yeah, we like that tournament because of that. It gives us a feel for, I think, where we're going to finish at New England's. This year we're considering, we got accepted at Escape the Rock for a full team.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And I think that we have to decide, they book these things a year ahead of time. I'm already late with my commitments to both. I've talked to both tournament directors, and I understand where tournament directors are coming from because they want the best product, and so I want to give them the best product. I have a very young team. I have one senior that's starting. I have other seniors on the team, but I have one senior that's starting. Anything can happen, but it's very young. So do I take those kids to Escape the Rock and really throw them to the wolves, so to speak, being young, or do I wait another year, go to Eastern States, and then go to Escape the Rock the following year? So we're gonna have to figure that out. We put both of them on our schedule, so we'll see which after I talk to
at
the
least one of them
directors.
Will be, we'll have your team. So
yeah, and we're excited about that. I mean, talking about schedule, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but we're gonna go wrestle Faith Christian Academy, which is
really wow. They are very like you, very young, and that quality's up there.
Their quality's off the charts. I've been watching them build that program for the last 4 years. I don't think people know what's coming.
I talk with Jay Singer every like once a week or so. He comes into my job and we talk wrestling, and wow, they're just insane.
Yeah, he's been really successful with his boys. He knows what he's doing. He has them in the right place. They have a great team out there. My prediction is they're top 15, maybe top 10 team in the country this year, and then the following year,
just,
top 3, top 5 in that arena. Yeah, so we're looking forward to that. We're putting those kinds of things on our schedule with our young team.
You guys going to any thought of ever going to like Lowell or anything, or?
I don't. It's kind of funny.
I know it's probably early in the year, so it's probably tough. Probably stuff scheduled.
We put a lot of thought into the way in which our season breaks down. We like to use that Christmas break usually for a grind. Like we put our kids through a 7-day. I don't want to say it's I don't want to say it's hell week, but that's a week where like we've been in season for 3 weeks and we really put them in the room, and we call it like we take them into deep water, so to speak, and we like to use that period for that purpose. Now this year we're supposed to go to Sam Cali that weekend because we have a young team, and Potato, who runs that tournament, is really good about letting multiple kids in weight classes. So where we might have 2 kids at 126, we can get them both in there and get some good
That'd be very beneficial.
Yeah, you wrestle like a couple Jersey placers, and there's always like a nationally ranked kid in your bracket, but you also have a shot of winning some matches if you're a young kid and you don't have a lot of experience. So we try to do that. Lowell, I have a funny story about that. I'm not so sure I want to share it.
We won't get into it then. We won't get into it.
Nah, I'll tell you. So what happened was, this is terrible, but I called Lowell the year we won New England's, and I said, hey, I got a young team and they're pretty good, and we really want to wrestle in the tournament. And I don't remember who it was at the time, if it was the AD or someone else, and they said, do you know who you're talking to? And I was like, what? He goes, you're talking to the Lowell Holiday. I was like, yeah, I know, that's why I called you. I have a good team. I want to get him in the tournament. And then he just kind of like chuckled and asked me to apply, and then they never called back. And then we were successful that year. And I'm not like talking, that's a great tournament. I don't know who I was. Like, I found out later the guy I was talking to has nothing to do with the tournament, just to be clear.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But since then, like, I know Desi from Cap and a couple people and the guys who run it, and they've asked me to come back, and it just is now where we schedule a lot of out of state stuff. And it's not to not face New England kids. It's that our kids wrestle with New England kids all the time. So
yeah, 9 months out of the year, you know.
Yeah, the better kids at Doughboy and Metro and Mayo and all these clubs in Rhode Island that are really producing and have been producing for a while. You know, our kids have an opportunity to wrestle them. So we like to go. We also look. I like to make it fun, right? Like, so we get to take the team out of state overnight.
Out of it too, you know.
That's 3-4 nights. We usually stay an extra day.
For the kids.
Yeah, have a family, we call it family, but have a team dinner after the tournament's over, stay an extra night. Like, we like to make it something that is enjoyable, because there's not a lot about wrestling that's enjoyable, right? It's hard work. And so you have to balance that, I think, especially with high school kids, so they don't get crispy or burnt out.
Definitely. So we touched upon it a little bit earlier. Don't necessarily describe to me your Hell Week practices, but what is like a normal practice at Ponaganset look like? You know, like what does it start out with? A warm up, you know, and then drilling, a lot of live, or are you still a lot of technique nowadays? You know.
It's funny because I hear everybody tell me what we do at practice. No one's there except we are. You know, we know what goes on. We run our practices like a college program does. So if you talk to a place like you talk to Princeton, and you sit through one of their recruitment processes with your wrestler or your child, and they'll talk to you about what their average week looks like, and it's amazing to listen to all these really great programs and what they do and what they think works. And so Dave is a very experienced coach. Our Saturday morning practices, if we don't have a match, is literally live for 1 hour. You walk in, you jog, and you go live for 1 hour. And the purpose of the practice is to break everybody. And so coach will leave, we'll talk, maybe we'll have a drink after, and we'll talk about who broke first, who didn't break, who needs to get broken,
practice,
who needs to get broken, like, so
that's probably fun.
So cognizant of that, right? And that's Saturday, and then Sunday's the day off, and then it depends on the week. So if we have a dual meet on a Wednesday, it's different, but we try to do most of our stuff on Saturdays or tri meets. So we try to like reduce the number of weigh-ins, but also like get multiple matches in, so it's worth the trip. And so typical, let's say we have a tournament week, we practice on Saturday, then Monday we'd come in. Monday would be light, like it's really like to get kids get really warmed up. We work on some stuff that each kid needs to work on, or if we're wrestling a particular team, we're game planning like what this team does. On Tuesday, we'll go live again a little bit towards the end. On Wednesday, we'll do like a drill practice. Kids hate drill practices because it's just really conditioning. And Thursday is you may do a little bit of live on a practice session where they do some technique, do drilling. We run it like a college where a lot of times where kids get the ability to drill with each other. You have really good partners in there. So working on stuff. And we a lot of times, like Jake wrestled with David Perez a lot this year. So we teach our older kids to be coaches. And we're in a lot of rooms, you know, they're feeding people to one kid or one really good kid. That's nice for that one kid, but it's not really beneficial to anybody else. And so you got to constantly be thinking about the kids coming up. And so, you know, David came to us as a very good wrestler. He came out of Milwaukee. Serge Boyasu did a fantastic job with him. But I'll just focus on David for a minute. David had a really good year. And I think a little bit of the reason why he had a good year is because he actually quit football. So he focused more on wrestling, which was a big sacrifice on his part. Yeah. He wrestled with, this is his training partners. He wrestled with Jared Hood. He wrestled with Joyce. He wrestled with Jake Joyce. And he wrestled with Billy Leichner. And he rotated. And so like, when you're wrestling with those different guys, all very different styles. Like Jared's good on top. Billy wrestles from space. Joe's a brute. Jacob is
heavier than him too.
Yeah, Jacob's a technician. So Serge says that all the time, iron sharpens iron. That's a truism that's true in wrestling. And so in that grouping, and I have those groupings all throughout my room. Like I have them at the lightweight, midweight, and upperweight. And so that's when you've built a really good team. And Jacob would work with David a lot, and he would coach him. Like, they would talk about certain scenarios, certain situations. What did you hear? How do I beat this? How do I come out on top here? And they constantly did that, and that really helps. And so on Thursday, that would be that type of a practice. Friday, strictly weight making. Saturday, we wake up. We do, I think, an excellent job in terms of cutting and weight management. We don't even call it cutting; we call it filtering, which we do. I'm not going to give away the trade secrets. I know Penn State has a way they do things. They have actual shake or drink that they give to all of their wrestlers before they wrestle. We do something similar. We didn't steal their top secret formula. I'm not comparing us to Penn State. But yeah, we have our own, and so we actually stay pretty heavy until the day of the weigh-in. Our kids don't have less typically than 80 ounces of fluid before a weigh-in. So if I have a weigh-in on Saturday morning, on Friday, my kids have had 80 ounces of fluid. It's a prescriptive fluid. It's not just water either. It's like all your electrolytes. It's like Harmless Harvest coconut water in the morning, a certain amount of salt with the Pedialyte, making sure you hit all your electrolytes. And then what we do is, we pull that out of you before you weigh in, and then you jump on the scale, you weigh in, you put that back in you. So you're never really depriving your body for an extended period of time.
Smart.
That leads to injury if you do that. It leads to poor performance if you do that. Andrew Real is our like poster child for discipline and weight cut. Like I think the other day, he lost 8 pounds in a practice, and
really?
then he was at 180 ounces still, and I said, "Hey man, you got to jump your ounces." He's like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, you got to jump your ounces up to 210." And he goes, "What?" I said, "Yeah, just trust me." And then the next day he lost more. So when you're training your body to not hold on to everything so greedily because of the way you've conditioned it, the better off you shed, you put back in, your body gets very accustomed to it, and you perform. And so that's a typical week. We also do things. The reason we wrestle live 9:00 in the morning on Saturday is because that's when semifinals are for big tournaments. Right. So a lot of kids, if you watch them in the beginning of a tournament, they come in, they just, you don't look like yourself. And so if our kids are really accustomed to wrestling live for an hour at 9:00 in the morning, and
Smart.
so we do a lot of little things like that. I'm not going to give away all the trade secrets, but we do a lot of little things that I think help our kids perform, to the best of their ability.
Gotcha.
Oh, one more thing. This is really crucial. I'm a teacher. Dave's, and I'll say this to all coaches, I'm a teacher. Dave's been doing this for 50 years. Our practices are not longer than an hour and 15 minutes. On a very rare occasion, do we go longer than an hour 30. It's fast paced. There is no wasted energy. The kids are constantly moving, constantly sweating, it's just one after another go. And we like it like that. Kids love it. We go to practice at 2:30. They get home at 4:15, 4:30. So nice. We're done. We're out.
It's an easy, yeah.
And it's. I think that also leads to them not being crispy. If you're sitting there for 3 hours a day working on a practice, kids are like dying. Especially kids these days that can't pay attention for 5 minutes.
So what do you think some of the main draws are that brings these kids to Ponaganset?
So are you talking about like CTE kids or kids that come from other districts, or the kids that are like with us now, or just why do they come there? The kids that are out of district?
Yeah. The kids, do they see it as like, a good school and great coaches and a great program?
So I gotta be careful. We get accused a lot of like recruiting, and because kids come from other districts to our school, it's kind of a fascinating fact. I think, not to say that the kids that haven't come from our schools have been major contributors. They have been. Tyler Riggs, essentially in my book, won our first New England title for us. He was expected to win that year, took third, came back, wrestled really hard. He was from Scituate. They didn't have a program at the time. Now they do. And so back then, but based on that idea that we just take all these kids from other districts, if you look at the numbers from 2017 to now, we've had 21 state champions. I think I have to look it up. I think it's 21 state champions, and 18 of them lived in Foster Gloucester. So in fairness to our program, it was less to do with CTE and it was more to do with what's happened around the country in other places. So if you remember, David Taylor lived, I think it was in Colorado. He went to a Jeff Jordan camp one summer, and then his family moved from Colorado to they tell it on the Flow films, in the middle of nowhere to go to this high school, Graham High School. And he became obviously one of the best wrestlers. Yeah. So this happens all the time. And so if you look at the numbers, like Jared, the Hoods moved to Gloucester from Cape Cod. The Reals moved to Gloucester from Connecticut years ago.
I didn't know that.
The Sam Lynch, Timmy Cook, Mike Joyce, my Joyce boys, I could go on. There's other kids that are just from Foster Gloucester, but a lot of people that, I think Jared was in third grade. He's now junior in high school, and when his family moved here. So they moved to Gloucester. I think for a lot of those people, for a couple reasons. Some of it has to do with the culture of a small town in Northwest Rhode Island.
Yeah, I've visited Foster before. It's my cousin lives there. I was there for a grad party. It was a good time,
It's an interesting place, but I think that now what's happening is people are looking at the success of our program, and they couple that, because I think this is really important to talk about. Ponaganset offers and not just, so let me preface this. I'm not saying this as a recruitment tool. I'm just explaining to you, Max, because you're asking me, what is it you think that's appealing to these kids? First of all, we're a rural district that's pretty high performing. If you ask the kids in my school what's great about my school, they'll tell you it's the other kids. If you ask some of the kids that we recently had transfer in to our school, they'll tell you that they love it. They tell you that the programs are great, the teachers are great, the people care, parents rave about it. They love the wrestling team. The wrestling team's very much like a family. Like we're very, I don't want to say secretive, but we're very quiet out where we are. We want to stay quiet. We know what we have. We have an absolutely idyllic situation. We have a administration that's super supportive. Basically, we are able to go to 5 out of state tournaments. They allow us to go to NHSA nationals. We have a fund set up. The school matches the money that we raise. We can use that to discount hotels and travel and registration fees for our kids. Like, we've spent a lot of time, building something very special, and we don't tell anybody about it. But I think that when you look at the I'm telling you now, but when you look at the educational side of it, we also have really good programs. And we have these CTE programs, career and technical, training programs, and you can go out there and basically, I don't want to say major, but you can get college credits in biomedical sciences, computer science, engineering, health and fitness, and the list goes on and on. And so if you're a parent and you're looking for a private school education, and you want to drop 25 grand, and you want to go to a place that has all these wonderful classes to offer for your kid that they're interested in, like Brown's Open Curriculum. Like Brown's Open Curriculum, you take what you want. You're Ponaganset, you take the core classes you have to take, but you also get to focus on stuff that you really want to do. And so educationally, I think that's a big draw for all kinds of people, not just for people that are on my wrestling team. I think the ancillary benefit of that is we also have a really good wrestling team. And and here's the truth, we as a program focus on a couple things. We focus on education. I'm a teacher. I'm a department chair there. We focus on living a clean lifestyle.
Curious.
I teach English language.
Oh, okay. English.
I call it
my best subjects.
I call it teaching life. But we focus on putting our kids through a super rigorous course load. And I've said this before, because we want them to be able to go to college. The big picture for our whole staff, not just me, is the whole purpose of high school sports is to prepare children to be adults and to perform at the next level, both in every facet of the game. And so it means that as a college student, or whatever else you want to pursue after high school, but also as an athlete. And so we talked a little bit ago about being crispy. I'll tell you what I think really attracts people to our program, because what they're finding out is, I'm a teacher. in education, we have these things called IEPs, individual education plans. In our wrestling program, we have what we call IWPs, individual wrestling plans, and every kid's on a different plan. It's not a one size fits all. Right now, if we do something very different in the spring than most people, I slow way down. I'm going to get back to CT in a minute, but I slow way down. Right now, a good group of my kids are seeing Jesse Delgado 2 nights a week. They go up to Harvard and they wrestle with Moose on Saturday. Stephen Keith is offered to them on Mondays and Wednesdays. He does privates with some kids. I just talked to Darius Little, who left Brown, but we're talking about possibly him working with a certain core group of kids this summer. And you asked me what I do is I look at a kid's wrestling style and I tailor their ability to where I think they're could be successful. And then I put them with a practitioner in their field who is so much better than everybody else. And then they just work at getting better. And so certain kids are really good at tilts and bars. They go with this guy if they're going to work top. Certain kids are very comfortable on their back. They're going to go crab riding with this guy. And I'm talking about being on your back to score when you're on top. And so certain guys are training for freestyle right now. And so they're spending a lot of time with Moose.
Yeah.
But they're doing 2-on-1 series. And, guess what? Beckzad, his brother, who's a 2 or 3-time world champion, is also in the practice with us. And you have 16 kids wrestling with 2 world-class coaches, and they're learning. And they're learning rapidly, and they're getting better rapidly. And that's one of the things we pride ourselves on, is that we get better. Like, our kids you almost never see our kids plateau. Each year, especially from 8th grade to 10th grade, which is built by design, you should see a jump. You should see a jump, believe it or not, in David Perez's performance and Joe Joyce's performance, and I am putting pressure on them. You should see a jump in their performance.
Yeah, you're name dropping them on here.
But they're that's the group I'm looking at. You should see a jump in their performance next year. You should see a jump in Mike DiOrio, Preston Marshall, Billy Leichner, Jared Hood performance next year. They should.
They're going to be upperclassmen now.
And then when you get to senior year with Jake, once you're committed and you're working with younger guys, and you're not I'm not worried. This sounds awful, but I'm not worried about Jake going to NHSCAs and winning a national title. I know that's important. I know that people love legacy. I know people should be striving for the best, in every facet on the way of the journey. That kid's going to Stanford in a couple weeks. He's got to build his body up. He's going to be in that room getting tore up. He's got to get a lot stronger. And so each of those kids has an individualized wrestling plan. And parents are obsessed, okay? And they should be. If you're a good parent, you're obsessed about your kid's future, right?
Yeah, you want the best for them then.
You pay for them to go to a ton of money to privates. You drive them and sit in a car every night. You take them to wedding. You make sure to weightlifting. You make sure their nutrition's correct. Mm-hmm. They want a group of people who are equally obsessed about their kids' future as they are. And so if you ask me, why do I think people come to our school? First, it's education. And second, it's what I just described. And we average an Ivy kid a year.
Yeah.
We average an Ivy kid a year for 6 years now. We have 7 kids in tier 1 institutions, 1 more committed now. And and I'll be honest to tell you that probably 5 or 6 more in the next 3 years. And that's another thing that's really changed, if you don't mind if I go off the tracks here a little bit.
Go for it.
When I first started coaching, I used to have to call people. I'm going to say which Ivy coach I called all the time and never called me back. But I used to have to call people all the time, and they would never return my phone call. Now I get 7-8 phone calls right after NHSAs at the end of the season. Then they say, Mike, who do you got for me? And so
tables have turned.
And so I say, hey, I got this kid. He's a sophomore. He's going to be a big kid. His dad's 6'5". He's got a 3.7. He's really flexible. He's a great kid. He lives a clean lifestyle. He works really hard. He just transferred to us. Mike, no problem. We just put him on our board. Send me his transcripts. And so they call me because they know my kid's transcripts are good. And the transcripts are good because education's the focus. Education should be the focus for every student athlete.
Yes,
I talked to Jay Jag. So one of the other things I did, which I felt was really important, is when I first started, I wasn't getting any traction with these coaches. So what people don't know is that for 10 years, I had every major college coach out to my house. So they would come out, we'd run these clinics. I had Jay Jaggers, I had Lou Roselli, I had Logan Stever, I had Mike Gray, I had Joe Dubuque, I had Enoch Franco from Stanford, and on and on and on. And so for 3 days, I would sit there with these guys, and we would go out on the boat, and we would have a couple of drinks, and I was just peppering them with questions. And of course, these guys like to talk about their
stuff. Yeah.
They like to talk about their job. They like to talk about what they're doing, and they would tell me all about the university, their program, what they did, what they're looking for. And that wasn't just for me to think about how I can get this kid in there. I was thinking, okay, Andrew Real could do that. He would be a good fit at this school. This kid would be a good fit at this school. I don't know if this kid could handle this school. So these other 3 schools are really good options for him. And people mock me for Ivy League and Tier 1 school focus. But what people don't understand is those schools have a ton of money. And so in wrestling, if you're a middle class parent and you're making under 150 grand and you can get into one of those schools, almost your entire college is paid for. Everyone else has 9.5 scholarships they got to split up amongst everybody. But Princeton has 9 slots every year. Penn has 13 slots every year. One of them goes to Wharton. And so you got to know if your kid wants to go to Wharton as a coach, like, and I'm a teacher, hey coach, I want to go to Wharton. What do I take? Well, I'll tell you right now, you take physics 1 and 2 AP, you take calculus A, B, and B, C, you take AP stats, and you take this other course. And the other courses in humanities, they don't care about. But so we've gotten it down to where I've talked to every admissions officer on numerous occasions, and I call them every year with questions from every school that we target and that we're interested in. And I know exactly what my kids need to do on their transcript to make them positioned for a multitude of options. And so that's why.
Yeah.
That's the focus. The focus is to get the kids to the next level. Hey, listen, man, winning New England's great. People will hate me for saying this. I could care less. Andrew Real commits to Brown, and Jacob Joyce commits to Stanford, and Mike Joyce commits to Brown, and Sam Lynch commits to Brown, and on and on. That's when I go home and I go,
yeah, that's something to be proud
did
of.
a good job, fella.
So really the first big question is, we kind of already touched upon it a little bit, but you think Ponaganset could compete for the next 4 or so years? Let's just talk next year. Do you think I believe that this year was the widest margin of victory, I think.
Yeah, I read that somewhere, and I think it was the Connecticut Online Wrestling gentleman.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
And he's pretty accurate. He knows his stuff.
Gary's a good guy. Shout out him. But so, do you think it could be that dominant again next year, or do you think it'd be tougher?
It's funny you asked me just about next year, because I actually mapped out the next 4 years. And when I first started coaching, I mapped out the next 4 years and I'm always looking forward. I think next year, if everything kind of stays the way it appears to be right now, I think that next year will be the hardest year to win New England's for us in the next 4 years. So only because I anticipate having a lot of freshmen in my lineup. However, if you look at the stuff you put out, which great job, I've been following you for a long time. You're a great resource. I often go to your stuff to look at who I'm wrestling and the kids that I'm wrestling, and then that gives me a nice baseline to go and do my coaching piece where we scout people. I think we can win next year. I think when you look at who we're returning, you got Jared Hood, who, in my estimation, and Jared won't be mad that I say this because he believes the same thing, should have placed this year. A tough loss there. Actually, 2 tough losses. I actually do believe, nothing against Peter Rinkin. I think
that was Peter's probably toughest match. Or at least not just right up there with the finals.
Yeah, there's a couple spots in that match where I think Jared should have capitalized when he was being hesitant, and that could have been a game changer. But, my theory is if you don't beat a guy, you're not ready to beat a guy. So,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to make excuses. If even if the ref's in the way, you got to remove the refs from the situation. So I think Jared really good, and I think David duplicates his performance or does better, and there's not much better he could do. One better, right?
Depends if there's Peyton Ellis in the way or not,
Yeah, I think this year, I think Peyton's going to be a weight class above him. Great wrestler. I definitely think David gave him a really good match in the New England finals. That was close.
State finals wasn't so close, right?
No, yeah, I made fun of David because I called him a turtle, and I do this a lot to try to kind of be like really light about big wins and losses. And so to me, winning and losing is absolutely part of the game, and they're all great learning opportunities. And like I just said to you before, when you don't win, you're not ready to win. Go back to work. Like there's no reason to get all worried about it and think about it and obsess about it. Just go get better. But you look at that match, and he looked like a deer in headlights in the finals. And it's a tough thing to rep.
Stuck, didn't he?
Yeah, in 30 seconds in, he got cradled. Yeah,
it just sucks that it happened in that match.
No, I think it was great. So it happens there. He comes off the mat. He's like, what the hell was that on my part? He goes to New England's. He's motivated, right? He takes second at New England's. He takes second at New England's. He's not happy. He goes to NHSCA's. He takes second. That loss was the best thing that could happen for him, and it's humbling too, and trying to be a four-timer's tough. Peyton, I think he's on the cusp of that, right? He won 3, I think. I'm trying to think.
I think it's his second.
Yeah. Either way, I don't know. I got to look that up. Either way, David's going to do well. I think we have some freshmen coming in, which we might want to talk about in a minute here, that I think are going to make an instant impact in the lineup. And I'm assuming they're coming in. They're enrolled. You have them listed in your report. So we can talk about that. I guess it's safe because they're enrolled in the school, and that's the general rule: is someone has to apply, someone has to get accepted, someone has to enroll. At Ponaganset, we do a commitment thing this year where the kid commits to going. They're enrolled, they have a schedule, and so it's a fair assumption they're going there. We could talk about that, but I don't count my chickens before they hatch. Yeah. But you got Robert. I always butcher his last name. I think it's
I was gonna say I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it.
But Robert is. I think he's.
We both know what we're talking about.
Robbie D. I think Robbie D is going to be. I think he fits in the lineup really nice.
13 probably, you'd think.
No, I think Well, it's funny. I have this conversation. Once they step onto campus, I have a conversation with every kid in early September about what weight they want to go, and so we decide at that point what we're eyeing, where we're going to go. Is there going to be a wrestle off? And so I think Robert's probably he's going to be wrestling opposite Jared, and not that he can or can't beat Jared. I think he'll be wrestling opposite Jared. So I could tell you what my foreseeable lineup is since we're talking about next year. I think at 6 I have a young hammer and Cole Lemovitz, who is an absolute stud. At 13 I got Bellini and Dunn. Dunn placed at States last year, and Bellini's an 8th grader that's coming in that's also very talented. At 120 I have Jared or Robert, and then at 126 I think I have the other one.
The other one.
Yeah, at 132 I think David Perez will be at 132. I think William Leichner is going to be at 38. There's another kid who is not enrolled yet, but is rumored to be coming and could potentially be at 38 as well. Cam Davis is enrolled. I think he'll be at 44. I think Joe Joyce will be at 50. 57. I don't know where Davis and Joyce are going to fall. One might go up, one might go down. That other kid might slide in. You got DJ Ravenel there. Then you got 65 because the weight class has changed next year. So you have Andrew Rial, I think, at 65 or 75. I also got a kid named Zach Rocchio, who didn't break the lineup this year because he had Bacala, Marshall Sultan. He was a freshman. He won freshman states. He's very solid. He can. But the funny thing about that kid is he's been wrestling for a year, and he wrestled those guys every day. By the end of the year, they were saying, "Coach, that kid's good." we can't score on that kid, you know.
For a first year wrestler, he's probably come a long way, you know.
Yeah, and he's one of those really edgy, tough kids, so he doesn't get dissuaded when he's wrestling guys that are beating him up every day, and they trust me, they don't take it easy on him. I got Marcia Salt at like 90. I have another kid named Lyric Picard who's very good in that area. I got Mikey Dorio at 215, 220, I think it's 215. And then Tyler B is a second-year wrestler at heavyweight. He had a decent season this year. And then I got a bunch of other kids. I got Christian Sazo, who's been wrestling back up because that middle lineup's been stacked for a long time. I got another kid named Keith Limoges, who's actually pretty good. And so I wish we could have two teams. I wish Ponaganset could have two.
I have now is it possible to, you know how at some tournaments, you know, some teams will have their JV team as well. Like, are you able to, let's say your team goes to Escape the Rock, but then your B team goes to, like, you know, a tournament up in Massachusetts or something? Can you do that? Is that a possibility? Like,
yeah, we're getting that.
We're a lot of petitioning or something.
Well, first of all, you'd have to approve it with the Coaches Association, and the likelihood of that happening, especially because of who we are. You know, if a Bishop Hendricken or a Coventry or us, you know, did try to do something like that, the coaches are not going to be open for that, because the whole thing about wrestling is you wrestle someone off and you have a starting spot. Like, the idea of giving another team a spot just because they have excess kids. I mean, if you wanted to improve the state tournament or a sectional tournament that they're having, yes. If all the coaches had situations like that where they could benefit from it, yes. I mean, I think in New York they put 5 extra kids in at sectionals, I think it is. Something like that would certainly work for some of our programs in Rhode Island. But I understand having one team, and I would love to have a Division I Ponaganset Green and a Division I Ponaganset White team. Do you think I don't know, that was my next question too. You think one would be Division I and then the other would be Division II? Well, I think that would be best for the state if you did something like that, and it would be best for I don't want to waste too much time on this, which will never get approved, but I think it would be good for the state, and I think it would also be good for the division. I think that if a school has the ability to field 2 varsity lineups, and look, they do it already, like Malvern Prep blue and silver, and then I've been at tournaments where I've wrestled against St. Ed's B team or St. Ed's green team or their white team, and Wyoming Sem does the same thing with their blue and white team. They just don't let Wyoming Sem put 2 teams in a national preps, though, do they? So Blair could also field 2 teams in national preps. Should they? And they talked about doing it in the NCAAs. They talked about Penn State having 2 teams at the NCAAs. Like, they talked about some of these high-power programs doing that just to better the tournament. So I don't know why you wouldn't do it. I do know why you wouldn't do it, but I can see an argument for it.
It'd be difficult.
Yeah. It would be difficult. So anyway, next year, we're young. We have 1 senior in that lineup I just mentioned. And so that would be the hardest year, I think, to pull off a New England title. But I don't know what everyone else has yet. I mean, I've looked at what you've come up with. You don't know. Kids are moving. Kids are transferring.
There's going to be a big update in, you know, a week or two, June 9th, with the rankings and stuff. So
yeah. So I think for the foreseeable future, you know, I'll say this. I think that really good programs, even if you're not starting in your first year, I think the kid benefits. I think that if you go to a program like a Bishop Hendricken when they were stacked and you're in the room wrestling with those guys like we talked about earlier, and then that was the thing. The funny thing about in Ohio is in SEM, you'd have a kid, you didn't even know who they were. For 2 years they didn't start. Then they won 2 state championships in a row and went to Iowa. And that's the great thing about our sport. We can wrestle year round. All those kids that aren't starting for me for like 2 months, 2.5 months, they're wrestling all year round anyway.
Yeah, they're still getting their mat time in.
And then they're in a room where they're getting better because their kids in the room are better. And they're in a room, if the coaching is good, they have the opportunity to benefit from that. And so, you know, I think that you look at any major program around the country that's good, and I think that you see crowding. Like, Faith Christian is going to be crowded next year. We just talked about Faith Christian a little while ago. They're going to get crowded. The schools down in Oklahoma, the 2 really banger programs down there, they're going to get crowded. And so, you know, the kids still elect to go there because they know they're going to have their shot and they're going to, you know, get better while they're there.
Gotcha. I got one last question, and this question is for Mike Joyce, the dad, not necessarily Mike Joyce, the coach.
Okay.
Just, you know, what does it mean to have two kids wrestling at high education Division I schools, and it looks like, you know, your third is on the right track to do the same at least. You know, how does that feel?
It feels amazing, but I'll tell you why it feels amazing. So this is personal to me, and this probably, if I were to psychologically analyze myself, this would be why I do what I do. When I was in high school, you know, my dad's no longer with us. I love my dad. He was tough though, and I think all of us kids from the generations ago had tough dads. But I had a brother, a sister, and another brother who all were straight A students. And my older brother got a full ride, and he was Division I All-American in cross country. My sister got a full ride because I think she was salutatorian or something. And my younger brother got a full ride. My dad had a rule in my house. This is crazy. He said, if you have your college paid for, you can go. If you don't have your college paid for, you got to go in the military. Oof. If you don't go in the military on your 18th birthday, which is when you're a senior in high school, your shit's on the lawn. So your stuff's on the lawn, right? So I didn't believe him. My older brother went to college and he had a full ride. My older sister went to college, she had a full ride. I wouldn't say I was a terrible student. I didn't take high school seriously. And I had beaten kids in high school that went on to go to Ivy League schools. One of them went to Brown. And I beat the kid in high school. I was a good wrestler in high school, and I was terrible in the classroom. I didn't focus at all. My parents tested me for special education services. They found out that I had pretty high IQ. I just had no interest in high school because I didn't understand why I should. And I didn't listen to anybody. And then when it came for me to apply to college coaches had called me on the phone after a very successful senior campaign, and I had a good junior campaign. I was academically ineligible as a sophomore, and I found my shit on my front lawn in March when I was 18 years old. My dad had thrown all my stuff outside because all the coaches, once they saw my transcript, were not interested in me as a prospective recruit. That's all true story. My mom was crying in the picture window. It was like a Norman Rockwell gone bad. And I was on my own. And I worked terrible jobs for the next 10 years while I paid for myself to get through college. I graduated when I was 28 from college. And so now you don't want to repeat the same mistakes, right, with your children. Yeah. And so what does it mean to me? Why I pour myself into not only my own children, but everyone else's kids in terms of their future is because there's nothing more disheartening than when you're an 18-year-old kid and you're good at something and you want to go somewhere and everyone closes the door on you and you beg and you knock and you say, I'll pay you the money. And they're like, you're so bad that your grades are so bad, we won't even take your money. And so what does it mean to me? It means everything to me. And that's why I teach. That's why I coach. I am trying to make kids' lives better after they leave me, but not only to make their lives better, to change the trajectory of their family. They're kids. And I look at my son and we spend a lot of money. You know, we spend a lot of money on wrestling with my boys. I spend a lot of time. I spend a lot of energy. And I look at my oldest Mike. We talked a lot about this stuff. And I said, what else is there to spend your money on? What else is worth your time? And I treat every kid on my team like that, you know, because they're my children. They're not from me, but they're my children. And they're
at least for the 3 months. You know.
Well, listen, man, we're together all year. The kids I'll see half those kids today when we go to practice, and we'll go to the weight room, or they come over to the house all summer. They're training all summer. They go in the lake. We have new rules in Rhode Island now. You can train from June 15th to in the summertime, and then after that, you can spend as a coach like 3 hours a week with the kid. We rotate the coaches, so the kids that are dedicated are wrestling all the time, and I'm with them all the time. It means a lot. I'm very happy so far. I've been very blessed. So far, my kids are doing better than me. I don't count anything or take it for granted, but you know, we still do have Joe, but we still have all these other kids that we have to get to their destination.
Yep. That about does it. Mike,
all right, dude.
Great talking to you. Do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I want to say thanks to you. I said you did a great job with your rankings. I'm glad someone is taking the reins up here in Rhode Island. I think it's overdue. I think our kids don't get the respect that they deserve because people haven't taken the reins as much as they should have. Some have tried. They don't push it. And I think that what you're doing right now, even us talking, it's promoting the sport in our area. I think that the rankings that you tirelessly spend, I know how hard it is to do rankings. You have to check everything. You have to see who beat who. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of energy. It's a lot of work. So everybody hit that donate button on the Schwartz report. And I love that you had me here today. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the respect that you're giving to the sport and to us. And I hope the best for everybody. And we're going to see what happens the next couple of years.